There we go. So as promised, I'm just going to give a quick Federation 101. What is Identity Federation? And this is from a slide pack that I did back in Australia, so it's Australian focused, but I think it applies here as well. I'm going to try and start with a couple of short videos. These are more advertising or promotional videos of the AAF, and see how this goes. It's going to start another thing which is not going to appear on the YouTube. Where does it do that? Can we see that screen? Oh, they're seeing that screen. That's fine. And we'll go back to the start. We'll point that down there. Screen for those guys. So they can see that screen. Okay. Let's change back to this one. It's fine.
Your users need to access multiple online services.
Okay. Oh. No, it's fine. Oh, that's better. That's better. Okay.
Your users need to access multiple online services. Wouldn't it be great if they could access hundreds of services with one username and password? Then look no further. The Australian Access Federation provides your users with a simple way to log in and access online services from within your network or from external providers. Users usually require a different username and password for each service, which can become impossible to remember. However, the Australian Access Federation solves this problem. By simply connecting to the AAF, our users will only need one username and password to access all of your online services, as well as numerous other services from national and international organisations. It's that easy. Your AAF connection provides a trusted and secure solution that connects your users to the services they need. Join numerous organisations who are already connected to the AAF, with over 1 million users. To find out more, visit aaf.edu.au.
Baseball instead, stop that. So that's a bit about advertising that we have at the Australian Access Federation, and other federations have similar short videos that give you a very high level overview of what the Identity Federation is. And from a very basic point of view, it's allowing your researchers to use their university username and password to log into services that are beyond the boundaries of your university, both nationally and internationally. We have another short video. Let's see how this one goes. Things. Okay, great. That's not the one we want.
Hey, are you someone who...
Shush. Try it again.
AAF, how it works.
So just replace AAF with your own federation name, and you should be good. So this is how it works.
AAF, how it works. The Australian Access Federation is a vital service for the Australian research and education sector. By connecting people with services, the Federation connection is seamless and often goes unnoticed. So here's an overview of what happens behind the scenes. When you want to access a service, navigate to the service and select Login. You'll be redirected to the AAF to select your home organisation. You'll then be forwarded to your home organisation's login page, where you can enter your username and password. Because both your home organisation and the service are connected to the Federation, a trust relationship is established between them. Using this trust relationship, sensitive data is digitally encrypted while in transfer, always keeping your identity data private. The Federation makes access convenient, simple, secure, and reliable. To learn more about the Federation, visit aaf.edu.au.
So that brings in another couple of aspects of what identity federations are about, and that's the privacy part and the security part, ensuring that users' information is securely transmitted across the internet, and that the service providers are doing the right thing with that information. So back to this one. So the Australian Access Federation, it's a federation that operates in Australia, provides a login framework for Australian researchers and the education community. Our real focus at the moment is on research, and we've actually got some additional funding from our government to continue to grow and expand our capabilities, providing federated authentication and looking at doing authorization for researchers to access services in Australia. The Australian Access Federation is a not-for-profit organisation, and I think most federations that are separate to their NRENs run in that way. They're not-for-profit. Many other federations run as part of their national research education network. So I know that Learn, which is the federation for Sri Lanka, is part of the NREN. It's an NREN service provided by the NREN. We're governed by the research and education sector, so our board is made up of IT directors and other folk from the research sector, which is really good because we get that feedback from the board, who actually has a on-the-face knowledge of what's happening locally. It enables researchers to securely access national and international research and collaboration infrastructure, and we're continually growing, and more infrastructure opportunities are being made available to our researchers. So why federated login access? It allows users to use their existing login details to seamlessly access shared resources and services without the addition of additional usernames and passwords. And that really benefits a couple of cohorts. It benefits the researcher in that they don't need an extra username and password and the other credentials to access the services. They just use their one university credential. It also benefits the service providers, because the service providers don't need to have infrastructure or processes or procedures to manage accounts locally on their service. They can reduce their support desk effort because they're not dealing with usernames and passwords. That problem has been outsourced to the universities. So the university has a problem of maintaining the users' credentials and not the service provider. And it operates in a highly secure and reliable environment, delivers the federated authentication. So one of our key tasks as a federation operator is to provide reliable infrastructure. And there's not much infrastructure we have to provide in the type of federation that we run. The main thing that we need to keep going is our discovery service. The discovery service is the mechanism a researcher will use to tell the service which identity provider they're from. And we'll have some examples of that shortly. The members of Australian include all of the Australian universities and a number of our peak research bodies. We've got research bodies such as the Children's Medical Research Institute, CSIRO, which is our government-funded research body, Shamari, which is a medical research institution out of South Australia, the Garvan Institute, another medical research institute, our New South Wales Health Department. So you can see a lot of the research departments we've been focusing on are medical based. There's a lot of sharing of information that's required between organisations for medical research, and that really requires high levels of privacy, and as we move forward, high levels of both identity assurance and credential assurance. And I'll be talking about those things later today. So how does it actually work? We saw it in the second video, a bit of a demo of what it looks like, but this is more in detail. A user or a researcher navigates to the service they want to log into. So it might be a data set from a research data set. It might be some infrastructure like a telescope or what do they call them? A microscope or anything. There's plenty of stuff that's connected, so they log in, attempt to log into that. They'll then be directed to our discovery service, which is where they select their home organisation or their home university, where they log in. Once they've done that, because both the home organisation and the service are connected to the Federation, there's that trust relationship. And that has been previously established by these two groups joining the Federation and signing off that they do the trust stuff, and they're allowed to access the service. So using this trust relationship, sensitive data is digitally encrypted and transferred, and keeping the identity data private at all times. And we do sit in the middle, but we actually never see or store or have access to any of that user data or usernames or passwords. We're just the middleman, the plumbing that sits underneath this stuff to make it all work. And we also provide the policy framework that it all sits on top of. So Federation makes access convenient, simple, secure, and reliable, and private, and good, and fantastic. So the other thing we do is provide, because the home organisation, yes. So we don't provide it, but the home organisation is where the staff, the students, and the researchers have their credentials or identities held. And these are usually research institutions or organisations and universities. The home organisation has some functions to do to participate in the Federation. They need to join the Federation. We have a process to allow people to join. It's really about them reviewing our Federation rules and signing off that they agree to participate in the Federation based on those rules. They also are responsible for issuing usernames and passwords and maintaining those usernames and passwords for the users by providing some sort of self-service password management or some way that the users can refresh their credentials if they lose them or if they just so choose to update them. They also need to provide a federated login page. And so the diagram there, the image is the login page for our Antarctic division, which is very cute. It's got some penguins in the background, and that's actually a government-funded research institution that looks after the Antarctica for us. That provides the home organisation with some real good opportunities. It provides an opportunity for single sign-on at the university, so it's an improved user experience. Australian universities have been doing single sign-on for many years, but I know that across Asia Pacific, a lot of universities are still struggling with just getting single sign-on to happen at the institutional level. So having this federated authentication come in provides an opportunity to not just connect to your federation, but connect services locally in your institution to a identity provider that will provide your users with single sign-on to local services. So that's the improved local identity management, less management of usernames and passwords at your institution. You then only have to issue one username and one password to access, for users to access all of the services provided locally as well as through the Federation. This improves your university's security in that it reduces the attack surface for bad guys to try and log into services provided by your university. If you have only one login page that everybody logs in through, you can really put a lot of effort into making that solid, secure, and resilient to attack from the bad guys. And you can apply multi-factor authentication at that single point instead of having every service have its own separate multi-factor authentication. You have a single multi-factor which then is associated with a single sign-on. The Federation itself provides access to many services. And I've sort of broken them up into a number of categories. There's a lot of collaboration services that are available. There's wikis, there's video conferencing, file sharing, voting tools, scheduling tools, timetabling tools, all to allow for better collaboration of users in the Federation. Users across multiple organizations can use these tools to improve the way they collaborate. There are thousands of publishers available in Edugain and in federations. We've got Emerald, McGraw-Hill, Oxford Uni Press, and others and others and others and others. So this is a real opportunity for your librarians to tap into those services and make them available to your students and staff. And as I said, we really focus in Australia on providing access to research services. So we've got data sharing, access through to ORCID, which is the unique ID for researchers. We've got a number of Galaxy installations running Galaxy, and some of the global services such as LIGO and CERN are also available to our researchers. People can fire up Jupyter notebooks through the Federation with their same username and password. So it's really up to the service provider what sort of stuff they want to provide to the researchers. And that's becoming very interesting in Australia. There's lots more interest now than there has been in a while of people bringing services to the Federation. This stuff does take time to get bedded in, and it's a struggle to start with, but once you get going, you'll really see the benefits. It's for your researchers and your universities. More services. We've got student life services, access to cheap music, clothing, food, airfares, etc. We actually in Australia provide a thing called Verified, which is a simple service which says, are you a student? And it says yes or no. And a service provider can use that to make a decision if the person is entitled to get a discount on various activities. And the universities and students like this service because it means they pay less. The university means gives them an opportunity to save some money while they're actually studying at the university. We've also got Edugain, which is connecting 70 federations, over 3,000 services, and many more identities to be shared amongst researchers globally. So about accessing, so some examples. Cloud Store is a very popular service in Australia. It's a file sharing service, but unfortunately it's being turned off at the end of this year. It's become too expensive for ARNet to continue to maintain and run it. But it was a fantastic service for researchers at one institution to share data with their collaborators. So we might just try and see if we can work through a login for it. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Okay, so I've clicked on the link to take me to Cloud Store, and Cloud Store provides its own discovery mechanism. So it has its own tool or own web page where the user can select their home institution. And as you can see, we've got a lot of institutions that we can select from. Most of these are universities, but because it's CSIRO is in here. CORDIT, which is our Council of University IT Directors, that's a very small organisation. ANSTO, which is our National Nuclear Physics Research Institute. And the one I'm actually going to log in today with is the Australian Access Federation Virtual Home. Now, this is a special IDP. It's really a IDP for the homeless, because not everybody is part of a federation, a university or a research institute. So we provided this sort of catch-all identity provider, but it's also the home where we actually live. So I click on that. I click on the login and it's broken because too many clicked. Again. Try that once more. So it's too enthusiastic. Single click. It's not going to play. Let's try this way. Okay, it's not going to play the game. Whatever reason. Let's go back to the presentation. Maybe the next service will do better. So now it's not having a good day of it. The next service we've got is our Research Cloud. This is a cloud computing infrastructure, provides access to EC2 images, to Kubernetes infrastructure, and it's pretty cool. I've actually got a number of services that I actually run out of this thing, and it's available to both our members in the AAF and Tuakiri, which is our New Zealand federation. And this is not part of Edugain yet, so it's only available to those two federations. Eventually, we can catch up. So this is their homepage, their login page, and it's asking me which federation do I want to log into first. So it's not saying giving us a complete list. So I'm going to select the AAF. And this time it's now returned with a different looking discovery service, but it's got exactly the same identity providers listed. And this is the discovery service that the AAF provides for its users. So if a service doesn't have its own discovery mechanism or service, it can use ours. And I can select the AAF. Hopefully this will be better this time. Okay, that's much better. So now it's asking me for my username and my password, and got those stored on the browser, so I can just go sign in. So this would be like a university's login page or a research login page. Hit the sign in button. Now it takes me back to the Nectar service. Eventually, it will show you all the gory details of my account within Nectar. So it's so good morning, Terry. So how did it know it was me? It's got an attribute about me. It's got my given name was passed from my identity provider to this service, so it could welcome me. Up here, it's also got my email address. It's actually used that to generate its own local username. And again, that had to be provided by someone. I never actually keyed that in to Nectar. It got that from my identity provider, provided automatically through the system. It's probably got some other information about me. I think this one uses the EduPerson targeted ID. So that's my globally unique identifier for me logging into this service. And first page I get is some advertising about some new activities that they're doing with Binder, whatever a Binder is. Binder Hub, I've no idea what that is. And I've got some access to some compute resources provided by Nectar. Some usage trends, some other buttons about how much compute. So I've got 13 instances running out of a possible 20 instances. So I've got 20 computers running out of this infrastructure, and that's all provided by Nectar for me. So as a researcher, I actually get access to this free, or not really free, but well-funded piece of infrastructure, so I can run services, do my experimentations, and then publish whatever I want to publish. I actually use this a lot for when I'm running training sessions, so I can set up service for people to use for their training. I also use it for doing a lot of testing and experimenting of various things that are identity related. I'm currently running out of here a Jagger instance. I've got a couple of IDPs running and a couple of services running, and they're all just play things, and I can just throw them away very quickly if I don't, when I'm finished with them. I don't have to worry about actually setting up any of that infrastructure. I really like that service, and it's not going away. It's continuing to be funded. The Atlas of Pathology is a service that's been around forever. It's part of Edugain. It's been part of Edugain for a while, and it's provided by, who is it? CZ. It's Czechoslovakia.
Well, Czech Republic, Czechia.
Oh, Czechia. It's an interesting service. I'm not particularly interested in it, but those who are interested in pathology photographs could be interested. And it's got its own sort of, which federation are you from? And we can see that the Australian Access Federation is listed here, as well as Kazu's Federation, Gakinin. Again, it's the same process. I select my identity provider, continue on. This time it hasn't actually asked me about logging in because it's logged in previously. I've logged in previously to a different service. So a single sign-on was happening. But this one is actually asking for a particular attribute. This one wants my email address. So this has obviously changed since I last used it. And they've actually changed it so that it now wants a attribute. And as a user, I can say, I'm happy to let my email address go to that service, which will enhance the experience that I have with that service. And now that I've logged in, I can show my account details. Here's stuff about me. She's got my old email address, so that doesn't make any difference. And I can go and access and do various things within this particular service. I can look at various pathology photos I'm not interested in at all. Too much gore. So, identity federations and Eduroam. Casper spoke about these this morning a little bit. And there has been in the past confusion about the difference between Eduroam and identity federations. I've had folk come up to me and ask, well, we've got Eduroam, can't that be used as our identity federation as well? And the answer is really no. So Eduroam is really for connecting wireless devices or devices to a network using a single sign-on, same username and password, whereas identity federations is about connecting web-based services to researchers across multiple federations. There are different standards in use. In the Identity Federation, SAML 2.0 and OpenID Connect are the primary standards being used to do the authentication and attribute transfer. And it's really about access to web services. There's an identity provider on one side, which is run by your home organization, and service providers on the other side. Eduroam's, as I said, purpose is connecting wireless devices to wireless infrastructure. It primarily uses the 802.1x standards, using radius, wireless access points, and wireless devices. So there's a lot of differences in the technology. At the end of the day, it's giving researchers a better experience when they're trying to connect to stuff. And the identity federations and EduROAMs can share the same identity store. So a researcher who logs in with EduROAM can use the same username and password as they would use to log into a federated service from that same university. I got one more little video, which is Australians connecting to EduGain. Let's see how all this plays.
EduGain. Be part of the global initiative and collaborate with education and research partners from around the world. Connect your organisation and services through a trusted and secure connection and remove geographical and technical barriers to access unlimited worldwide collaboration. Once connected, users can access global facilities, tools and services with a single username and password. Services can provide international partners with secure access to Australian research and education infrastructure. If you're an Australian Access Federation subscriber, connect to EduGain today and extend your global reach. To find out more, visit aaf.edu.au.
So that's again one of our marketing pieces for connecting.
A researcher found that men over 45 who don't have erection problems have a little bathroom habit they do before getting in bed with a girl.
Stop.
And let me tell you, after my husband discovered this, our sex life.
Not to tell Heath about that one. Okay, back to the real presentation. Other issues. Okay, so one of the things that the second last video was speaking about is that organisations need to join EduGain. Each national federation will have a different policy or way that institutions can join EduGain. Some will just throw everything into EduGain, which is, I don't think, the right way to do it. We actually have some hurdles that an institution needs to jump to join EduGain. And this is a bit down the way of baseline. So we expect all of our identity providers to be doing Certify, which is the security messaging protocols that have been set up. We also expect them to be doing the research and education, the ND category. So they're actually releasing attributes or supporting the release of attributes to services that are also doing research and scholarship ND categories. We will be extending that to include those other three categories that Nicole mentioned this morning, the anonymous, pseudo-anonymous, and the other one. Personalised, thank you. And that's going to happen between now and sometime next year as we start to enable that for our IDPs. There's some other bits we need to do before we can do that, but we are planning to do that. We've done that. So we've done the EduGain, talked about refeds, and we're going to stop at that point with that particular presentation. So that's, I just sort of thrown that one in there for anyone who was in the room who didn't actually understand what identity federations were about, and to give you a bit of a background on identity federations that your nation can provide using the AF as an example. And we've been using the AF as a bit of an exemplar for how we'd like federations to be set up in the Asia Pacific region. So moving on, let's see where to next. So this is now back to the program, Advanced Federation Management and Multi-Factor Authentication. So I've got a number of slide packs just to go through on what multi-factor authentication is about. The first one is, what is multi-factor authentication and why is it so important? Some information from the field, rolling out multi-factor authentication to university populations in Australia. Some of the issues that have been experienced and that I've got feedback on as universities have moved to making multi-factor authentication as a mandatory setting for all user accounts, and implementing the MFA signalling, the REFED's multi-factor profile. And that gets really interesting with trying to actually do it in real life. It's good to have Nicole and Casper here to help me out, because I might get some of this wrong, because we're still doing this. So why is multi-factor authentication so important? Requires user to provide 2 or more verification factors. So what is multi-factor authentication? And I think over time, this will change into what is strong factor authentication, because multi-factor is now being overtaken by newer and better ways that are easier for users to deal with and stronger than having 2 different factors of authentication. Passwordless authentication is sort of where things are going in this space. But as Nicole was saying, these standards that REFEDs do are continually being updated, and I think the next iteration will be changed from multi-factor to strong authentication. So multi-factor authentication is a security system that verifies a user's identity by requiring multiple credentials. So those multiple credentials could be made up of something you have. So it's some physical object or possession, such as a USB stick, a secret token, a bank card, a key, etc. It's something you know. This is generally a password, a PIN. I'm not sure what a TAN is. Okay. But it's something that's in your head, something you remember. And this tends to be the weakest of the factors, particularly passwords. It's something you are, some physical characteristic, so a biometric, fingerprint, iris scan, voice, typing speeds, patterns in your key press intervals. There's a whole raft of things that can be measured about you that can be used to verify that you are who you are. Why it's something that you are, or it's something you do. So it's your location, your device, your IDP address, your velocity that are actively monitored. So if I had to log in today from here in Sri Lanka, and then in an hour's time I was to try and log in, or I was seen to log in from Australia, that's a bit impossible for me to be in 2 places that are that far apart in that such a time frame. So that would be a real flag to the system to say that second authentication is dodgy. So that's what that one's about. Most people go with something you know and something you have. Something you have is generally your phone. So it has some app on it. And I have about 6 multi-factor apps on my phone. It's not a good thing, but that's the way it happens. So the REFED's multi-factor authentication. It's a profile that outlines requirements that an authentication event must meet in order to communicate the usage of MFA. So that's different from just saying we will turn on multi-factor authentication for all users at the university. It's more about how the event of a multi-factor authentication is communicated between the service provider that is requesting that event and the identity provider that is providing that event. A lot of service providers, I think all but probably one that's doing MFA at the moment. These are others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of the services that are out in the Federation and in Edugain don't use this multi-factor signaling yet. They just say, hey, IDP, authenticate this person and do it however you like. I don't care. And they'll happily let the person log in with whatever mechanism. So if the university has set up multi-factor authentication, the user will go through that process, but the service provider will never know that that process has happened. So that's what this profile is about, is that signaling of, please make sure the user does multi-factor authentication when they log in, Mr. IDP, and the IDP says, yes, that user happily did multi-factor authentication. Here you go. Or if they can't do multi-factor, respond back to the server saying, error, sorry, I can't do multi-factor authentication. You're going to have to let the user know that they need to do something else. So with this in place, it allows the service provider to know that a higher quality of authentication has actually occurred when the user logged in. It defines some signals from the service provider to request that multi-factor occur, and for the IDP to respond that multi-factor had been actually performed, and is supported in both the SAML2 protocols and OpenID Connect. Factor independence.
Can I ask?
Yes, yes. Sure. Do you want to get the microphone too?
I was just curious to know whether it is the demand of the service provider for multi-factor authentication, or it is the demand of the identity provider to verify the user using multi-factor authentication.
It's the demand of the service provider wanting to know that multi-factor authentication is occurring. So the service provider say, do multi-factor, or don't do anything at all and respond with an error.
Okay.
The identity provider, they do it, but they're asked to do it.
Okay. I thought it should be the demand of the IDP to authenticate the user using different medias.
It's been set up that way. That's where it's a little bit confusing, because a lot of the universities are just turning on multi-factor authentication for everything, but they're not telling the service provider that that has happened. And this is the way that the service provider can ask and the IDP can respond. So I'll come to that a bit later when I actually go through what's happened in Australia when multi-factor started to get rolled out. And one of the big drivers for why we have this particular profile. But this profile is about the service provider saying, please give me multi-factor or don't give me anything at all. So the factor independence, the factors must be independent. This includes the processes for recovery, replacement, or additional authentication factors. They must mitigate the risks of attack such as phishing, online cracking or online guessing, and theft of a single factor can't be used to break the second factor. So if I have a username, if I have my password, I can't use that password to go and change my multi-factor or my second factor on my phone app. I can't go and reset my phone app if I've only got the password of the user. I need to have both factors, or the original multi-factor, second factor, to be able to change that. So they need to be independent, basically. You can't use one to change the other. And a lot of the commercial products already have this stuff in place, so they've done all the hard work. Validity, lifetime, and time of authentication. So at the moment, the profile does not impose any elapsed time constraint. So if I do a multi-factor in the morning, it should last forever until I actually start up a new session with a new browser. That has been an issue, and people say, well, we need to know when the authentication occurred, and has there been a long gap between when it occurred and when you next access the service. So they've added a earliest time, or the time of authentication needs to be passed back as part of the response. And the remember me options for multi-factor do not satisfy this. So if there is an option to say remember me, turn that off, because it's just going to confuse. failure modes. There's no IDP exceptions. So some universities will set up their multi-factor authentication that it doesn't apply if you're on campus. I think most of them are started, if they have done that previously, will start to turn that off, and you have to do multi-factor wherever you go, because everyone, users, researchers, are now getting used to the fact that multi-factor is a thing. I need to do it everywhere. Doesn't matter if you're on campus, you're on your VPN, or you're overseas, multi-factor everywhere for everything. All authentications performed per requirements include guidance and all authentications performed for the requirements, including guidance on interval and use of the profile. I'm not sure what that means. I'm going to skip that. Unless you can help me out. I don't know where I got that one from. But with the standard, this is one of the standards that's used is the SAML 2 standard. And if the IDP cannot perform multi-factor authentication, it should respond back to this requesting service provider with an error saying that I cannot do that for you, and not allow the user to continue, or not keep the user held back at the IDP saying, I can't do multi-factor authentication. I need you to do some sort of step-up process or onboarding of your multi-factor authentication. Some universities I know have not turned on multi-factor for students. So if you hit a service that wants multi-factor, they will get stuck at the university going around in circles saying, please turn on multi-factor. You can't, and they're stuck there. So there's no way they can get back to the originating service. So implementations. Few services have implemented the REFEDS MFA as yet. There's one significant one that has, and that's the National Institute of Health in the US. And that has resulted in many IDPs supporting the profile so that their researchers can access that particular service. That service is a significant source of funding for institutions and universities, and it's also a significant source of research data. They turned that on because they're both giving out money and very important research data, so they really wanted to know that the credentials that were being provided were of a high quality. Therefore, they've turned on the multi-factor authentication. And yeah, there was a mad rush for universities to then go and implement a multi-factor authentication signal. So flip the word out here. It's hard to know which other services have implemented the multi-factor authentication as yet. There's actually no signaling in the Federation metadata that multi-factor is enabled at an IDP, or that the service provider is requiring it. But you should be able to see, if you look at your IDP audit logs, if multi-factor authentication is being passed back and required. But that's a bit of plumbing and a bit of mining to actually find out what services are actually requesting it. The easiest way to find out if a service is requiring multi-factor authentication is to have users go to that service and then realize that their university doesn't have multi-factor authentication on, and their support desk will get hammered with, please make the REFEDS MFA available to us. So some options for IDPs to implement the multi-factor. There are many options around. So you got Shibboleth with Duo, Shibboleth with Google, Auth. You got the commercial providers. So Microsoft Azure has a multi-factor, Okta, Ping, and many others now provide a multi-factor authentication as part of their commercial offering. But some of these will require some strange and wonderful and weird configuration to make the REFEDS multi-factor authentication available to their users. And most of these commercial offerings will generally sit behind a proxy Shibboleth IDP. So what I mean there is you've got Federation services, they connect to, well, they request an authentication. The authentication will go to a Shibboleth IDP, which is acting as a proxy between the Federation and the university's identity system. A lot of universities have deployed Microsoft Azure or Okta or some commercial product, which generally don't work very well in the identity federation space. And they don't know anything about the refed's MFA signaling. So the proxy in the middle, the shibboleth, can do that conversion of refed's MFA to however the commercial identity provider deals with signaling of multi-factor authentication. And unfortunately, they all do it differently, and they all do it badly. So the futures of the refed's MFA move from multi-factor to strong factor authentication, which I mentioned earlier, using WebAuthn, passkeys, passwordless authentication, and others. So these need to be included in a future version of the refed's strong authentication. And there is a way to measure the quality of your authentication, the multi-factor. I think it's in common. The US Federation have put a table together, which are MFA technology threats and usage table, which is linked here. Jump out to that for a sec. Quickly. All the way to America for this one, and it didn't find it. Yeah, that's weird. It was there last week when I put the slide together. So it's just basically a table of the different types of multi-factor authentication. Like you have SMS to your phone, or telephone call, or an app, or a YubiKey, or whatever else that's available. And they give it different strengths: low, medium, and strong. And the use of SMS as a multi-factor signal, multi-factor option, is being deprecated. So a lot of universities, when they first rolled this out, thought, oh, this will be easy. We'll just use the SMS option to send out a token to the user when the multi-factor is required. And that has been found to be very phishable. So a bad guy can get on the phone, talk a person through an authentication, get them to give them the token that's been generated or sent to them via SMS, and the bad guy's actually stolen the credentials of that person. So SMS as an option is actually being deprecated by Microsoft and other vendors, and will eventually be taken off the table. And some of the other weaker ones will eventually disappear as they are worked out to be not as strong as originally thought. Let's go back to this. So the strong authentications are currently out of scope for this thing, but will be in the future. So that's a bit of an overview about what multi-factor authentication is, and some information about how to do multi-factor. We'll get into some more detail now. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this is a bit of a summary of what's happened in Australia over the past 5 years of rolling out multi-factor authentication to universities, populations in Australia. And it's been interesting to watch from the sideline, and I'm glad I'm not in the universities trying to do this, because it's been a challenge for them just to get multi-factor turned on for their staff and students. So over the past 5 years, rolling out has not been an easy transition, many issues, and we'll discuss some of those here. So why have universities chosen to turn on multi-factor for everything? And it's really about security, security, and security. Data breaches are occurring way too frequently, and in Australia, if you have a data breach, you need to publicly make people aware of it and make people who are affected by that data breach aware that their personal information has potentially been stolen by the bad guys because of some security breach. Ransomware attacks are occurring all the time, and a lot of those are occurring because of weak passwords of administrators or systems that allow the attackers to start putting their ransomware throughout the institution. The institution I used to work for, QUT, had a major ransomware attack just before Christmas last year. About 2 days before Christmas, all their printers started printing off. Your university has been overtaken by ransomware. The whole campus, every printer was printing this stuff off. And yeah, it was bad. And they just basically had to shut down the university for 3 weeks over Christmas and bring everybody in to get it sorted. About a month, 2 months later after that, I got a letter in the mail from them because I used to work there. And they said, "Dear Terry, sorry to say, all of your personal information has been taken. It's got your bank details, I got my passport details, I got everything." And about 3 months after that, I actually found out why that had happened. That was because somebody had taken the whole of the HR system and done a backup of it, put that backup onto their U drive, and left it there. They'd been there for years and nobody had noticed. So all that personal information from all the staff at the university was stolen. And we don't know if the bad guys know that they've got that, but they've definitely got it. So yeah, my information's out there anyway, so I didn't really care that much, but it's cost the university heaps of money to rebuild systems, notify people, and offer effectively counselling for those people who had their data stolen, and provide them access to a third-party company that will help people try and minimise that risk for those particular users. So that's just one instance. This has happened about 6 or 7 times across Australian universities. And we also have mass phishing attacks of people trying to steal credentials. So the bad guys are just hammering away all the time. So we're just raising the barriers, making it harder and harder by introducing multi-factor authentication to the university sector and the research sector as well. Most of the universities had the approach of IT staff first, those who have access to the core systems, make sure that they are secured up first, and they're generally used in a pilot process to get an understanding of what it actually means to turn on multi-factor authentication for users. Then they move on to staff that use high-value systems, staff that use a HR system, staff that run the student systems, they're generally second. Then it's turned on for all staff, then for all students, then make it turned on for all local systems. So it's all users, all systems. Usually at the end of the list is the Federation, so we're just another service for them, just a single service, and they just turn it on for all federated access. So at the end game is all users, all systems, multi-factor authentication, no ifs, no buts, no maybes. It just happens to everybody. That's the approach. Sounds good. But we still have a long way to go. Some universities have reached their end game and have multi-factor for everything. Many are still getting there, but they're all moving in that general direction to get there. Mainly, it's a people-related thing. Some of the issues that are resulting from pushing out multi-factor. When it first started, a lot of pushback was from users who said, "I don't want a university app on my phone, my personal phone. I don't want to have your authenticating tool on my phone. Either buy me a new phone or provide me another mechanism." A lot of students, or many students, don't have capable phones of running a multi-factor app, and they tended to fall back to the weaker types of technology for students because they tended to be cheaper options, such as SMS, which, as I mentioned earlier, are vulnerable to phishing and will be eventually deprecated as an option. And there's also the costs, increasing licensing costs for good MFA. So as you roll it out to everyone, there's going to be a cost, a licensing cost. So that's not just a once-off cost, that'll be a yearly cost that will add to the budget of the university. But I think that cost is a lot cheaper than having all of your university data stolen and having to go through the embarrassment of a breach. Uptake's generally been strong. Students tend not to care, and they understand, and they mostly comply. They're happy just to jump on board because they're already doing it for other stuff that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Some staff are more reluctant, and I know of one case where a university lecturer left the university because he just didn't want to play the game. So he threatened, "I'm going to leave," and the university said, "Okay, here you go," and he left.
He left because he didn't want to do
Yep.
MFA. That's insane.
I know it's insane, but he didn't want that, so he left. It happens, and there's nothing much you can do about it. If you want multi-factor for everyone, it's got to be for everyone. The last crowd that tends to be the hardest crowd to get to uptake of multi-factor are your contractors and visitors. I'm not sure why, but these are transient users, and they have their own strange and wonderful onboarding processes. A lot of them don't really encompass the multi-factor requirement. I tend to be one of these contractors that do a lot of work for universities and have to get credentials. I'm now getting, that's why I have 6 or 7 different multi-factor tools on my phone, because every university has chosen a different way to do it. So as I get another account, it's usually another multi-factor thing that I need to plug in. And another VPN application for my laptop. I've got about 7 of those, which is interesting. Technology generally use what the identity system vendors provide. So all of our universities have their own local identity management systems. The majority is Microsoft Azure, closely followed by Okta. We have a couple of PIN federates. We've got 2 that are using the F5 authentication stuff, which is horrid. Very good, but it doesn't really play in our space well. We've got 1 small organization using Google Authentication. We've got a couple that are used Shibboleth with Duo, and we've got 1 that's using a new tool called Cypherize, and it's a passwordless authent technology. So that's where we're really looking for a strong MFA option to cover those guys. And it's not only MFA, a lot of smart monitoring. So logging into Brisbane in the morning and Colombo 5 minutes later, is that possible? I mentioned that earlier. So a lot of these tools will actually start to or can detect that, these anomalies when people log in. And there are different requirements based on the user's location, so on campus or foreign. But as I said, most universities now are saying it doesn't really matter where you are. They're multi-factor. If you're going overseas, there might be some other stuff that we layer into it, into your authentication. No signaling occurring, so service providers are not aware of credential strengths being used. So when they request an authentication, they get back generally whatever they're told, or they're not even told what how the user logged in. They just get back it happened. They cannot request a minimal level of credential strength. So no one is implementing authent context signaling apart from the Refed's MFA profile. So with these commercial vendors, nobody's really doing this signaling at all well. Explaining Refed's MFA can be difficult. MFA has been rolled out. Job done is what people say. I've done multi-factor at my university. Why do I need to do more? And service providers can't just accept that it's been done in a federated environment, because University A down the road says they've done it, University B saying they're still doing it, but the service is connected to all of these universities. They need to know by asking if multi-factor can be done for a particular authentication event. Need technical signaling in place to really know. The service provider really wants to know, and we really need that signaling between at the technical level. And the selected MFA options may be weak. So we need to, there's no requirement in the current Refed's MFA to say how strong the authentication is. Is that right? You can have whatever second factor you like at the moment. Is that going to be addressed, or is that just
That'll be part of the new profile.
So there is work to address that to make sure that at least a reasonable second factor is being used. Two good factors are being used. So what's happening in your part of the world? Is multi-factor being rolled out? Is it for all users? Is it for all services? Is it for federated services? What MFA options are being provided? Are they weak or are they strong? And how far have you actually got in your rollout at your universities? And these are questions that I've been taking to our universities and saying, well, we want to do this multi-factor signaling stuff. Are you ready? Have you done your multi-factor work at home to enable us to sort of turn this on for your university? So, any questions before we move on for the next how-to? Does anyone know how far the universities have got with their multi-factor authentication? Do you know if your universities are actually rolling it out to their users at the moment? Hands up. Just for some?
For example, let's say if a transcript need to be verified or any change of authentication, so things like that. So there are payment related matters. So there are a few things for which MFA is used, but the others are single sign-on, but not with MFA.
Yep.
But I want to ask another question also. Now, MFA, if we specifically use things like SMS, will work acceptably if there are regulatory frameworks where you can't change the SIMs as you wish and things like that. Now, in a country, if those are not enforced, then will it really work? Because there will be some loopholes of getting through it. Specifically, if we use things like as part of MFA, something like one-time password or something similar to that.
If the one-time password is being SMSed out to the user on their phone, that's considered very.
This is in addition to the regular password. If a one-time password is also used as MFA,
that's still considered weak.
Yeah.
Because there's ways the bad guys can fish that second factor off you. So that's why it's being sort of deprecated and turned off. So Microsoft have actually made an announcement that the SMS signaling, or SMS MFA, will be turned off in a future release. So it won't be an option.
Yeah, because even in Microsoft Authenticator, sometimes it's basically a kind of SMS that they send. But I think the assumption is that there are regulatory frameworks where people can't just exchange the SIMs or change the mobile phones, because if you can do that, then even if someone does gets involved in a fraud, there's no way of tracking it. And then so people can play with it, specifically with the devices where you can program EMEI number or any other things. Then of course it's very difficult to track. So I think some regulatory frameworks are necessary so that registrations of the phones with SIM IDs, etc., and those are enforced.
Yeah. When I was in Nepal, with the previous APAN, I'd actually buy a SIM, and there was very little checking that I actually was me. So give me some money and here's your SIM. I'll put it in for you. So yeah, that's right. There's no real regulation on who can get a SIM in Nepal. In Australia, it's very regulated. You need to provide all sorts of credentials to get a SIM for your phone.
People may want to change their phones, but still there should be a procedure where that is properly recorded. If someone uses that, so then the mobile provider records all the parameters.
Yeah, so that's a bit beyond the scope of what we're doing with just the signaling stuff.
Yeah.
But it's important to think about and have your universities think about what are the issues, where can the bad guys potentially get through when you start to do multi-factor. And looking at stronger options. A lot of the apps are getting smarter and smarter, requiring you to do more and more stuff but in a nice user-friendly way. And there's also the passwordless authentication, which is getting very smart nowadays.
The other question that I wanted to ask was regarding EduRoam. Now, I may be wrong, but do you do kind of a replication of the hashes of the passwords for the authentication purposes? Because I think right now the way it works is, because we faced this issue when we were configuring EduRoam, the password hashes required to be replicated for the various servers to work. But wouldn't it be better, instead of doing that, I don't know whether it is already in place, that instead of replicating the hashes, if there is a if you use either some kind of web service or Auth2 or something like that to authenticate the users from wherever they are from the primary source, than replicating the hashes of the passwords. Because that can lead to some compromises.
So what happens in the Identity Federation space is that the university runs the login page. So it's within the university's infrastructure, and it can talk directly to the directory server, the Active Directory, or whatever behind the scenes in whatever secure mechanism you have on campus. Right. The service provider will never get the hash, never get the username, never get the password, because the authentication event happens within the university domain. So that's why it's secure, because the university has control of the IDP and control of where the hashes are sent, where they're stored, and which is different to EduRoam. I'm not exactly sure how the radius stuff.
Yeah, because we faced the technical issue. It may be a reason then, maybe that since you use EduRoam and we use LDAP, I don't know whether there was a kind of a mismatch there. So need to explore, because now because of that, what we did was we came up with a different set of passwords for the purpose of EduRoam, because we did not want to compromise on the other passwords that are used for the single sign-on.
Yeah. So EduRoam's, as I said earlier, is different to Federation authentication, but it's quite safe to use the same credentials for both. I might introduce you to Simon Green from Singarin, who's a guru in the EduRoam space. Right. And I think some of your team has already spoken to him this morning, but he was involved in the EduRoam Zeek project. He set up some of the Docker images for that.
Okay.
So he's all over this EduRoam stuff, as is Vlad from New Zealand. But he's unfortunately not here. But those two work together to set up all that EduRoam on-premise infrastructure stuff. So I'll introduce you to him. He's very hard to catch, though. He's here, there, and everywhere. He's very mobile kid. Right. Very smart, though. And he's all over this EduRoam stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would like to put him in touch with the current director. Earlier, I was the director, but now there's a new director. Yeah. So that we can work on it.
Yeah. Okay. You've got to remember they're two separate federations. So if you're working on EduRoam now, you've got to come back and do the whole thing again with the federated identity stuff. Right. And they're different technologies.
Yeah. And because EduRoam currently helps a lot whenever people travel.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
What time are we breaking for lunch? 12:30? Any more questions?
Is there any way an IDP can convert a single factor authentication into a multi-factor authentication and let the SP know that it's multi-factor authentication happening?
Are you trying to cheat?
So suppose if any service provider doesn't support single factor authentication, and if there are multiple universities, as you have mentioned, some supports multi-factor, some supports single factor, but I want to provide these services. I want to make these services accessible to all the universities. So if there is one university, so
I'll come to that in the next set of slides, which we might actually take into after lunch.
Okay.
But there is a way that you can set up a service provider and say, give me multi-factor. The university says, no, I can't. We'll send back an error. And there's the service provider says, well, I've got an error back from the university, can't do multi-factor. Let's back it off and try again with the single factor authentication. Good, that's working. Just because you give me single factor, I'm going to give you a restricted view of my service, because I don't really trust that authentication, but we want that to work for the user. So there are ways to back it off. So if the multi-factor authentication works, the user might get access to more stuff. They also might get a warning saying multi-factor is not available at your university. Please go and talk to your IT admins and let's get it happening. And that's what the NIH has done. So there are many ways to sort of work around this. But the one thing you don't want to do is say, you don't do it, but we'll just signal it that you're doing it anyway. That's not what we want, because then you're breaking the rules and somebody will get caught out and Nicole and Casper will come and jump on your head.
Yeah, we do.
or turn you off at the sort of, I don't know what the process is, but if you're doing it badly, then yeah, you'll get found out and the services won't trust your federation. Again, it's basically breaking that level of trust.
Okay, thank you.
Nicole's about to have some words.
If I can turn the mic on. There you go. I can say not from a Refeds or EduGain perspective, but at Shayon, we've just had to do a long multi-factor project, our own organisation, to roll out to our users. I think some of the challenges Terry mentioned we found. We had people who didn't have a work phone, so using authentication factors on their phone was a no-go. So we tried to roll out YubiKeys for those users, but not all services will accept a YubiKey. So in the end, we had to give all of our staff a work phone, which previously they didn't have. So that's an unexpected cost, right? That we didn't factor in from the beginning. But the biggest challenge for us, which sounds terrible, was we didn't know what services we had. So there's a lot of the services we run that we knew about and were obvious. But trying to do multi-factor for everything is really hard. So there's we have the services which are federated. So much easier. We could just go through them. We turn them on one at a time. We tested them really, really easy. We then had all of our Microsoft stuff. That gave us some different challenges with how they implement both Federation and the MFA. But yeah, we realized we just didn't have a comprehensive catalog of all of our services. And we also found out that our HR and finance team had a lot of services that were not federated that we didn't know about. And those were actually the most important services, right? These were where your passport details are, where your bank details are.
Yep.
And we uncovered in the project a whole bunch of those that we just didn't know about. But yeah, our biggest challenge was, when is the project done? Are we worried about this one small admin account? Does that need MFA? Or the thing the guy uses to get Adobe licenses, does that need MFA? So when are we done was a hard question too. And you're really looking at all of our services, and it really solidified. We always had a policy that everything should be federated. People were obviously not following that policy. So it really helped us solidify how important the federation side was, because it makes rolling out MFA so much easier if it's federated already.
Yep. So universities have thousands of services they provide to their users, and having a catalogue or even a list of what services are available, because every faculty, every school, every department will have its own little, we'll set up this service because we don't want to talk to central IT to set it up for us. Or we'll just go and put a credit card into that SaaS service so we can get access to that thing. And you might have 3 departments using exactly the same service, but nobody knows. So having an audit is probably a good thing, just to know what universities are using. I'm going to call it lunchtime now because we've only got 5 minutes to go. So when we get back, we'll look at implementing the MFA signalling stuff, the Refeds way. So enjoy your lunch. So I think it's an hour and a half. So we're back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.